Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am in beautiful, lovely Escazú, Costa Rica, where it has just rained very hard. So I waited to do this so that we don't have the same experience as last week. But today is Sunday, the 9th of June in the year 2024. And I'm going to be really direct about this. I have a lot to say. A lot. Okay. It's been an interesting week. And I want to talk a little bit about that first. Actually, a lot about that first. And then I'm going to talk about where we're going in this coming week, which is going to have something to do with where we've been in the last week. So it's very important, I believe, to pay attention to the things that are going on in the background. And I'm going to refer to something again because we all need to be paying attention to it. And so today's Sunday, June 9th. And the other day, last week, when I was on this podcast, I was speaking to you about the week ahead and that we were having this lovely Sun-Venus and that there was this beautiful Venus star point, which was going to be one of the points on the five-pointed star that Venus makes over the series of years between her retrogrades and her direct motion and all. And then if you go a bunch of years forward, she makes a flower. And this is lovely and it's beautiful. At the same time, we were having a new moon 2 days later, and Venus was going to still be part of that new moon. So the Sun and Venus were together and making this lovely connection in Gemini. And then they were going to greet the moon. The moon was going to move into Gemini and greet them on Thursday, and it was going to be, again, something lovely. And I wish it had been as lovely as I had anticipated or as other people were anticipating. Because I looked at other astrologers, and of course I'm going to look at other astrologers, see what they're saying, because I follow astrologers, right? Because I'm an astrologer. And I'm looking at other astrologers on social media, and I'm thinking about what I said, and I'm thinking about what other people were saying, and it was all about how beautiful this Sun-Venus cazimi was. And cazimi is like the Venus was in the beams of the sun, the heat of the sun. And that can be very hot. And whenever we have an aspect with the sun and another inner planet, it's especially hot. Now, we're going to have Mercury in the coming week, but more on that later. So what happened? So that was Tuesday, and Monday, some very ugly things transpired. And I had conversations with people who were very upset about some very dark, upsetting things. I'm not going to lie, things were dark. There was a friend here who was talking to me, and she was very upset about losing money and in some deal that she was doing with business, and how the clients that she was dealing with were, this is real estate, and she was dealing with something very, very harsh. And she was very upset. And I heard another story from another friend where I live about some ugly goings on by someone who was renting from her here. So there's a lot of rental stuff, a lot of real estate things going on that were not good. And this was, I'm not going to get into it to protect the privacy of those involved, but it was suffice it to say, my friend here was very upset, and it was ugly. She had to deal with an ugly thing. Police got involved. Something awful was going on, and she had to draw up another contract to someone who's temporarily staying here. And I had something that was aggravating and uncomfortable and stupid and really, really making me angry. And it was a situation that could have been avoided and taken 2 minutes, and instead it took 2 days. So I sat here saying, okay, I'm missing something. I have to acknowledge that I'm missing something. And if you saw my Instagram on Tuesday, you saw me talk about what I was missing. And I'm reiterating this here now because for the people who don't see me on Instagram, I haven't been posting very much, lots of reasons. I am going to reiterate this story, and I want to tell you what was happening. Because of the sun and Venus, Venus gets heated up, right? And Venus is a little tricky. She can be a little tricky. And I have learned that Venus isn't always this wonderful flowery thing. We want her to be that. She is in many ways. The things we desire, the things we wish for, the things that we find beauty in, obviously. But remember what Aphrodite is like. She is a little bit tricky. Remember in the Persephone myth how she started that ball rolling because she looked at Persephone and said she's chaste. And she was looking at Pluto and she's saying, he's chaste. This is, I got the Marina. I don't like this chaste business. And she had her boy Cupid shoot an arrow at Pluto. And she then caused a whole sequence of events that was the Persephone myth. And she was like being a little tricky and a little nasty and, but she doesn't like when people are chaste. Now, this has nothing to do with chastity and sexual activity or intimacy or anything, relationship so much. But Venus can be a little difficult. And when she's heated up like that, it's like stressful and pressure oriented. But more importantly, where they were located in the zodiac, which was 14 degrees of Gemini, was not just, okay, it's Venus and the sun. It's Venus and the sun at 14 degrees of Gemini, which then became 16 degrees of Gemini for the new moon, okay, 2 degrees later. In my astrological experience, this position triggers things at the end of the cardinal signs. So 14 degrees of Gemini, or 14 degrees of any mutable sign, that could be Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces, Gemini. Anything at 14 degrees and hovering around 14, 15, 16 degrees is triggering something at the end of the cardinal signs. And in this case, it's triggering Pluto. So Venus, once again, was triggering Pluto, just like she did in the Persephone myth. And what this did was trigger Pluto, who is at 1 degree Aquarius. But it triggered it by an aspect that we call a semi-square. Now, you've heard me talk about squares. We're going to have a square coming up this week, which we'll talk about. A square is a challenging aspect. Well, a semi-square is half a square. So it's like, it's not a pound, it's a half a pound. So it's 45 degrees instead of 90 degrees. So this is, again, a bit of a hard aspect, a stressful aspect, yet it's one that people don't talk about very much because it's what we consider to be a minor aspect. And this is not minor. What happened here the other day and what was going on, I would not by any stretch of the imagination call minor. It was temporary, yes, but it was not minor. It caused a lot of problems. And the semi-square is not something that's necessarily on our radar very much. But I sat here and I said, too many things are problematic right now. For a Sun-Venus cazimi, it should be lovely. Now, had it been a few degrees earlier or at a different place in the zodiac, it probably would have passed in a lovely way without much riffraff, okay? However, in this case, it was triggering Pluto. So what I realized was that there is this trigger of Pluto right now, and Pluto is in a place of being triggered by things like minor aspects. And why is it? It's because Pluto is at 1 degree Aquarius and is going to go back to 29 Aquarius. And so all of this 14, 15, 16 degrees of mutable is something that provokes Pluto in its transition. Right now, Pluto's in Aquarius, and we're like, okay, it's in Aquarius. We're getting used to this. We're feeling this out. We're seeing things change. But it's on its way back to Capricorn. And we can't forget this because it's not done with Capricorn. And so we have to remember this going forward. And what I realized was the seriousness of how Pluto got triggered by this aspect. Now, if it was just the moon passes these points all month. Okay, the moon is always going to be passing these points, and it did again on Thursday. And I found actually the new moon, there were things that went into Friday, but that was also Saturn, Venus, and we're going to talk about that. But I didn't find it as serious with the new moon as it was on Tuesday with this whole situation with Venus and the sun. Probably because the sun heated up Venus. It was an exact aspect, and that's when you see with the sun, and that's when you see these things get very, very hot and sharp and intense. And so there was intensity here, you know. So what I feel is that these are points now when we start to have lunations and things like Sun, Venus, and all, or Mars or something touching these points. Eventually Mars will go into Gemini, but not for a while. We do need to pay attention to how this is going to play out and what might be triggered. Pluto doesn't go back into Capricorn until early September, and then it leaves November 19th. And so by November 20th, we're done with all of this, but it still feels like a transition. So if you're moving from one house to another house and you know there's things you have to do between this house and the next house, I'm moving out of my old house, I'm moving into my new house, and we have to make sure the construction's done on the new house before we can take our stuff out of the old house. It's transition. It's like any other thing. But this particular transition that we are experiencing is leaving something behind that won't come back again for another 250 years. And so each and every one of us is in a transition, and as a collective unconscious, we are in a transition, and we need to pay attention to the transition. And so when we get triggered, as we did the other day, we need to recognize it and name it as the transition. And in the background of everything that's happening, Sun, Venus and this and that, Venus and Saturn, and anything that's happening, there is the transition of Pluto out of Capricorn into Aquarius. And this transition right now of it going back into Capricorn. So we're in this wobbly place with Pluto, which is uncomfortable. And so there's a commonality I saw in all of these conversations I had, that we want one thing to end in our lives that we cannot stand anymore, and we want something else to become our reality. Okay, so there's something that's gone on for long enough, for many years, we're done with it, we're sick and tired of it, and we need it to get the hell out of our life. Whatever that circumstance or situation is, we want it gone. And my one friend, the first friend I mentioned, who had some real estate deal and she lost money and stuff, she was so upset by what was going on. She told me she was done. She felt broken. She said, I'm broken. And when I heard those words, I'm like, oh my God, and it's her job. It's her job. And she's, she wants to transition out of it. But this is something that's very important to pay attention to. If you feel like something broke you or has hurt you so deeply that you don't know how to come back from it. And she came back from it. I came back from the situation I had to deal with, but it's going to be particularly uncomfortable, and it triggers a lot of frustration about where we are in our lives versus where we want to be. And so we are getting a whole handful of crap thrown at us from this transition. And there are times when you might want to just break down and cry. And you just say, I've had it. I can't do this, because you don't see a way out. Because we haven't passed through the last stage of Pluto in Capricorn, which I think may be a real kick in the butt for each and every one of us. I'm not saying that my friend or anyone else can't get, it's not oh my God, I can't get out of this. It feels like you can't get out of this. Remember, this is a transition. And if you feel like you can't get out of this, it's because you're ending something huge in your life. and you just don't see the way out of it yet. You know what you need to do, maybe, but the stages and the steps to get to the other side of this is very complicated. So I really recommend that in this time, from now until, the end of November, which is quite a while, we all need to be nurturing and caring to ourselves, first of all. We need to know that we're not broken. Big, big, big knowledge. You are not broken. If a circumstance or a situation surfaces and it makes you feel like you are broken, you need to go and change your day. You need to go out for a walk. You need to go spend time in nature. You need to get like a hot shower. You need to go for a swim. You need to go for a run. You need to do something that is giving you life again, okay? Which is what I did. So I had a stupid situation on Monday and Tuesday. I got a massage on Monday. There's a woman that comes and gives us a massage. I got a massage, and an hour later, I was pissed off. An hour later, because of this circumstance, this situation I had to deal with. And I spent hours on it on Tuesday. And, I was cursing people here, alone in my house, of course. The only person who heard me was my cat. And I was cursing people and saying things and saying this, the stupid person, blah, blah, blah. And, I felt it strongly. But on Tuesday, what I did was I shifted gears. After I dealt with the situation in the morning, I shifted gears. I watched some of a mentor, Melanie Ann Layer. I watched some video that I have of hers. And her energy pulled me out of it, watching this video that I had from a few months ago. And then I got ready to teach my membership class on Tuesday night, and that made me feel better too. It was always nice to be with people and bring them new awareness and stuff. So that was really good. But this was not fun, okay? And when I hear my friends tell me they're broken, I know they're not broken because they're strong people, and they're not in a bad place in their lives. That's what it felt like. And I'm glad she sort of enunciated that for me, because that's what it felt like for people, that they just I don't know what I'm going to do. This is making me crazy. Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the thing is to plow through it and recognize it as the transition. Name it as the transition of Pluto from Capricorn to Aquarius, and going back into Capricorn and coming back out and going to Aquarius, okay? So we've got some things that we have to settle in these next months. It's not a joyride, okay? It's not. And so I just want people I'm raising awareness. I'm raising, I should have said something. I should have been more on target with this last week. I apologize. But I think that I was taken in by the Sun Venus and the fact that we do have a beautiful experience. And you know what? It's Sun Venus. So even if my friend felt broken, ultimately she was going to come out of it and be okay. So I think where my head was at last week when I recorded this podcast is ultimately we're all going to be okay. Yeah, now I'm seeing Pluto, and that's what I talked about on Instagram the other day, is this Pluto thing. So if you're, lots of people that I read and listen to on social media and stuff and online, they weren't saying anything about this. Nobody said anything about this. Nobody said this Venus sun is triggering Pluto. And, maybe I just didn't find the person who was talking about that. But I can tell you that this was triggering Pluto, and if you did not feel good during this past week, this is what it was, okay? And I'm talking 20 minutes about this, and I have other things to talk about, so this might be a long podcast. But this is important to talk about because we are in deep of this transition. We are in it. And the new moon triggered it, and then we went right into Venus squaring Saturn. And that was the wee hours of Saturday in my region of the world. And if you live in Europe or you live in Australia, it was definitely your Saturday. But I felt it plain and clear on Friday. And I'll tell you the details of what happened now, since I didn't tell you details of the other thing before. I was here, I was sitting down to work Friday morning, this was Friday, and I felt it before. So Friday morning, I was sitting here on my computer working, and I hear this thump. And I look into my garden and I see this big tree piece with leaves on it tumbling into my garden. And I drop my computer, I run outside, and this worker in the condominium next door, so there's a condominium next door to me over my garden wall, he chopped a piece of the tree that was in the way of their electrical wiring. So there's electrical wiring on the wall so that no one could climb the wall and get in and rob anyone or cause any harm. My people where I live have that circular barbed wire, which is really nasty, but so is the nasty electrical wire above the wall. And I sit here and I hear bugs hitting the electrical wire, and it goes tick, 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 and they're getting electrocuted. So he threw this because it was in the way of the electrical wire. It wasn't that in the way of the electrical wire, but I guess they told him to cut it, and he cut it, and he threw it in my garden because it was coming from the tree on this side of the wall. And I looked at him and I said, no, no, no. And I, gestured that he should be taking it. He goes, no, it's in Spanish. It belonged on your side. Well, when he threw it into my garden, he hit my honeysuckle, he hit my orchids, and he hit my roses. And this thing was so big and huge, I had to grab it with my hands and pull it away from my plants. And my honeysuckle was all like discombobulated after that, but it had thorns all over it. This branch had thorns all over it. So it was heavy. I could hardly lift it myself. I had to tumble it over into another part of my garden. It was hitting my orange tree. It was like, I have a nice garden. I work hard on this. And when I saw him do this, and he was just like flippant about it because he's a worker and he doesn't care, then I got nasty. And then I finally said to him, so I talked to him in English at this point, and I was just screaming at him, and I called him an idiot. And I did not just call him an idiot, I called him an expletive idiot, which I'm sure you know which one that was. And I called him that a few times, and he just ignored me, probably because he doesn't know any English. And then I ran and got to my landlady, and I explained what happened, and she sent the groundskeeper here to bring a machete and chop up the branches and pull the whole thing out of my garden, which was enormous. Okay. I mean, it could have been much more enormous. It could have been so much worse. Fortunately, he knocked over one of my orchids that's in full bloom. I'm sitting here like a prissy American, right? In Costa Rica, I'm like, he knocked over my orchids, but I work hard. These things are expensive. It takes time and energy and love and care. And my whole life wanted to do a beautiful garden like this, and I'm finally getting the chance to do it. And you make something nice, and people come in, and it's nice. And this idiot threw the whole thing and couldn't care less what was going on. And I just felt, in that Venus square Saturn sense, I felt defeated. And today is Sun, Saturn, and it just sort of extended itself into these days where I just felt defeated. And I'm like, and I said to my friend here, I said, you can't have anything nice. And she goes, I know exactly what you're talking about, because she's done a whole lot with the garden, the big garden, and the kids come in and they kick the soccer ball around and they kick it right into her plants that she spent money on and that she's been reimbursed for. But it's like she works really hard. She's an older woman and she works really hard to make this beautiful space. And, people disregard it. So she understands, and she has a farm, and she's got a lot going on there where people disregard things too. So so we had all this triggering of the transition, and then we had this feeling of defeat. So I think we've had a few rough days. Okay, guys, this has been rough. Now, Mars is effectively in Taurus. It is in Taurus. It went there in the wee hours of today, and Mars doesn't like Taurus, like I told you last week. It doesn't like Taurus very much. Mars is active and action-oriented and passionate, and it belongs in Scorpio, the opposite sign of Taurus. And on Tuesday, and we're already feeling this, Tuesday, Mars is going to trigger that transitioning Pluto in a square. So this is a direct confrontation of Mars and Pluto. Okay, after what we've just been through in these last days, please keep your head. Please. I got to scream at this guy the other day in English, which he didn't understand, although he probably understood one of those words because it's kind of universal. But he just ignored me. What I really wanted to do was shoot him with the hose, but we had no water that day. And then Giselle, my landlady, was like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. He could get electrocuted on that fence. And I'm like, it's a good thing the water wasn't on. Okay, just keep your head, Deb. We need to keep our heads. Mars is squaring Pluto. Mars is in very patient, but remember what I told you last week. Taurus gets pushed to a point and then it charges. So we have to be really, really aware of ourselves, our body, our driving, our stepping out into the world, our interactions with others. And if you need to go scream into a pillow, go do it. Right now I feel tension in my jaw because, as much as I wanted to say things to people, I had to, deal with it as humanly as possible in a good way. But I have had to really curb my anger because this was, what could I do? What could I do? I got to curse out in my house. And my poor cat, luckily she doesn't know what any of that means, but she hears the force by which I'm speaking. Then on Wednesday, the 12th this week, we have a square of Mercury to Saturn. So first we've had Venus, then we had the Sun today. Sun is squaring Saturn today, and then we have Mercury square Saturn. So if you feel like, again, using certain language because it's triggering this whole thing all over again, just be careful. I don't know what that guy would have done to me if I shot the water hose at him. It seems like nothing. I've just thrown some water. I do it at the cats all the time. Just some water. But Giselle was right. Maybe he would have gotten electrocuted. And I said, well, the rain falls on the electrical fence. She's like, if he touches that, that's not good. So, I have to, the universe protected me. And I have to keep my head. I have to go for a walk, go in nature. You know what I did today? I hammered some coconuts. I had to open coconuts, and I drink the water, and then they're pipas. They're the little ones. And I drink the water out, and then I want to get the coconut flesh out. And so I was slamming them with the hammer, and it was really good. And that's how I get the coconut open, and I get my frustrations out. So slamming this. It's like, yeah, I'm slamming this coconut. Find something where you exert your energy and get this out, especially during Mars Pluto, please. And just be careful. I can tell you to do something like meditate, but these are active planets that require our engagement with energy. So Mars is a very energetic planet. It is not in an energetic sign. It's better in an energetic sign like Sagittarius, or it was just in its own sign of Aries. Now that it's in Taurus, it's like, I bite my tongue. Forget it. Forget the bite conflict. And bite conflicts are a thing. In German New Medicine, bite conflicts are a thing. Go look them up. But it's something where you want to be very careful of what happens. Now, Mercury is squaring Saturn on Wednesday, and then Mercury meets the Sun on Friday the 14th in Gemini. So that's Mercury's sign, and this is another Cazimi. This is another intense relationship of the Sun with an inner planet where they go up in flames. Okay, so you might want to say something really nasty at 12:33 p.m. Eastern time on Friday the 14th, but you got to find your way through this. It's a good time to dialogue with someone. It's a good time to journal. Use this in a mercurial way. Make some jokes. Find the playfulness in things, and your nervous system might get in an uproar, but go ride your bike, go for a run, go for a swim, go do something that's going to release this energy. These are weeks, these are days when we need to release the energy safely, smartly. Okay? This has been tough. It's not been fun. What's underlying everything is the transition of Pluto. And things may feel particularly stuck or particularly complicated right now because of this transition to Pluto. So it's going to heighten everything else. It's going to turn things around and heighten everything else. Now, you know that if Mercury is about to square Saturn on Wednesday, that means in today and tomorrow, Mercury is hitting that same point. And I'm looking at my chart here. Mercury is at that same point that... Yeah, Mercury's at 1353 as I speak. So it's going to go to 14 later today, tomorrow. Mercury's going to trigger that transition of Pluto. Please keep your head. Go journal. Go do something. I can't tell you enough how important it is this transition that's underlying everything we're doing right now. And if you feel like crying, cry. If you feel like yelling at someone, go yell at the pillow, go do something, but don't damage your relationships is what I'm saying, you know. Don't get hot-headed. And, you know, it's interesting. This was not a Mars aspect the other day, you know, when I got upset. These were Venus and the sun, but there's still heat. The sun is heat. And, you know, you may want to punch someone and you may want to scream at someone, but you've got to try to remain cool and not so hot-headed. This is very important for each and every one of us. And if Mercury is in a place where we get heated up, well, then there's going to be a part of us that wants to speak nasty words. So, you know, so Mercury right now, today, tomorrow, the 10th on Monday, it really would be a place where Mercury could trigger this Pluto thing, this transition, and give us headaches. But I really recommend not allowing yourself to go there, okay? Then when we get to Mars Pluto, which is revving up and we're going to feel it, you may feel it tomorrow, you may feel it Tuesday, you may feel it Wednesday, you have to be aware that it's Mars Pluto, and boy, oh boy, do you want to punch someone. And it's been a long time. Mars hasn't been in Taurus since 2022, and it wasn't squaring Pluto then. This is a different dynamic. It's a different animal. Pluto is now in Aquarius right now, in this moment. Before it was Mars in Aries squaring Pluto in Capricorn. Now we're past that, and we've got Mars really like in a stubborn sign with Pluto in a stubborn sign. These are fixed signs. They're not cardinal. They, you know, this is more like, bleh. I'm just like, I'm going to stay right where I am, and I'm not going to budge. And this is, you know, complicated for us right now. So look for solutions. Do not feel that there is no solution and there's no way out. There is a way out. You don't have to feel broken, and you don't have to feel defeated. Thank God we have astrology. Thank the goddess that I understood Venus square Saturn, because when I felt so defeated on Friday, I knew that it was the Venus Saturn. I said, okay, Saturn is often the feeling of defeat. And I explained this to my friend the other day when she was talking about feeling broken. I said, this is the feeling of defeat because of Saturn. Saturn, you know, Saturn can act like the devil. And think about like all sorts of animations that we've known over the years of the devil. And the devil that doesn't, you know, the devil is in your mind, right? It's about the reason and like the very reason of things, the experience of that'll never work. You just don't bother. Why are you bothering? It's not ever going to work. You'll never get out of this. And it's the dredges of the subconscious that are coming up and getting in our way. And you have to just go, not listening to you, doing what I need to do. Not listening to the subconscious, not listening to the devil. And just going forward and doing what we need to do. Okay? If you feel defeated, go for a walk. Go do something that helps you just disperse this energy. So this is really what's going on right now. You know, we're not going to have Pluto go back into Capricorn until early September, and I really do feel like we are having we're going to have to get through that little section of this year with a lot of wisdom. So stay close to the podcast, stay close to yourself, listen to yourself, and, you know, allow yourself this transition. Okay? Allow yourself to be going through this transition. Next Sunday, the 16th, when we meet again, Venus is going to be in Gemini. This is her last week in Gemini. She's going to square Neptune at 11:46 p.m. Eastern Time. And then she's going to move into the sign of Cancer in the wee hours of Monday for most of the world, except like Hawaii and the Pacific Coast and stuff. Very nice places. But she'll move into Cancer, where she's got more compassion and empathy and sensitivity and love. Okay, so she's going to square Neptune, and she's going to have this moment of deep empathy, sensitivity, and, one would hope deep sense of love. And then that's a nice way to leave Gemini and move into the sign of Cancer. It's still a square, so there may be some tricky things that happen next Sunday. So just have your senses aware, have your intuition heightened, stay close to your intuition, stay close to your instincts, stay close to yourself, and we're going to move through this. Otherwise, the sun is going to speak nicely to Chiron. That's going to help smooth things over late Wednesday, early Thursday. We are going to have some regular moon aspects. The moon is in Leo as I speak, and it is opposing Pluto. And so there's a whole trigger of Pluto. Again, like I said, the moon triggers Pluto all month in many ways. But we have to, it's like there's something, like you're triggering your dog who's about to have puppies, okay? She's not in the mood. Think of your dog. I'm glad I could laugh about this. Think of your dog who's about to have puppies and what she feels like. And she's not in the mood to be toyed with. Okay? This is Pluto right now. So if you feel uncomfortable or, not like yourself, allow the transition to happen and go make a cup of tea and go read a book or something. Okay? I thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to me go on about last week in a week that we do have some major stuff going on with Mars and Pluto, with Mercury and Saturn, with the Sun and Mercury. So I'm going to say let's use the lessons from last week to apply them to this week, and do not allow yourself to get so triggered that you do something stupid and you regret it later. Okay? That's the really important message. Don't do something you're going to regret later. Just keep your cool, go breathe, and then come back to the situation. The guy didn't care about what I was calling him the other day. He just did his work and just ignored me. There you go. So lucky for me, he didn't throw his machete at me. Thank you for listening. I love that people come back and hear me every week. Thank you for listening to me on the Golden Astrologer Podcast. And please join me on Instagram. Join me. That's the Golden Astrologer. Also, join me in a session. That's even better, because you're going to get a deep understanding. If you sit with me for 90 minutes in an astrology session, you're going to get a deep understanding of what is really going on for you as we make this transition. This is a hot time to get an astrology session. You can also get a Reiki session, and we can smooth everything over and move you to a new place. And you can join me in mentoring. And if you do a 6-month program, we're going to get you through this transition and bring you to the other side of it. Everybody's in transition right now. Come to me for mentoring, and we'll move through this together. And I can walk through life with you as you go through this. We are all in a transition. Think about what it is that you want to get to on the other side of this, something that you can't tolerate anymore and that you want to really deeply change in your life. Make a wish about it. Visualize it. Manifest it. Work with me or someone who's going to get you through this. Thank you for listening. A beautiful week to all. Much love to everyone. Gratitude to everyone.